It started the night I lost my job. I still remember sitting in the small apartment I could barely afford, surrounded by half-packed boxes and empty coffee cups. Everything felt like it was falling apart. I had no savings left, no friends I could really call for help, and no plan for tomorrow. Then, out of nowhere, my phone buzzed with a message that would change everything. It was from Clara, my ex-girlfriend's older sister. We hadn't spoken in over 2 years, not since I accidentally ruined her favorite dress at a family party. She was strict, serious, and not the kind of person who forgives easily. So when I saw her name on my screen, I froze. "Are you still in the city?" the message said. "I need help around the house. Temporary job. Room and board included." For a moment, I thought it was a joke. Me, working for Clara? The same woman who used to glare at me for not knowing how to fold napkins correctly. But something about her message sounded desperate, or maybe it was me who was desperate enough to believe in a strange kind of fate. I typed back before I could overthink it. "Yes. When do you need me?" Her reply came instantly. "Tomorrow morning. Bring nothing but yourself." The next morning, I stood outside her large Victorian-style house, the kind that looked like it belonged in another century. The white paint glimmered under the sunlight, and a tall gate separated it from the rest of the neighborhood. I hesitated before pressing the doorbell. When she opened the door, I was caught off guard. Clara looked different. She wasn't wearing her usual business suit but a long, flowing robe. Her hair, usually tied up, fell over her shoulders. She looked calm, composed, but there was something unreadable in her eyes. "You came," she said softly. "Good. Come in." Her tone wasn't welcoming, yet not cold either, just controlled, like she was testing me already. I stepped inside, the air smelling faintly of lavender and Polish. Everything was spotless, too perfect. I felt like a stain just standing there. She led me to the living room, and I couldn't help noticing how quiet the house was. "I thought you hired a staff before," I said, trying to sound casual. "They all left," she replied shortly. "Too many rules." Her eyes lingered on me for a second too long. "Let's see if you can do better." She handed me a list: dusting, laundry, kitchen cleanup, organizing her wardrobe. I nodded, pretending not to be nervous, but then I noticed the fine print at the bottom: uniform required. I frowned. "Uniform?" She smiled slightly. "In the laundry room. Try it on before you start." Something about her smile made me feel uneasy, but I didn't question her. The laundry room was large, bright, and filled with the scent of detergent. On a hanger, neatly pressed, was a maid's outfit. At first, I laughed. I thought it was a prank. A black dress with white lace trim, an apron, stockings, and even a small headband. "She's kidding," I muttered under my breath. But then I remembered Clara didn't joke. I stood there for a few seconds, heart pounding. I could just walk away, pretend I never got the message. But the truth was, I had nowhere else to go. Rent was overdue, and my pride wasn't going to feed me. So I sighed, picked up the uniform, and went to the small bathroom. When I put it on, I almost didn't recognize myself in the mirror. It didn't fit perfectly, a little tight around the chest, loose at the waist, but somehow, it transformed me. The reflection staring back looked softer, uncertain, almost fragile. My breath caught for a second. "This is temporary," I told myself. "Just a job." But when I stepped out of the room, Clara was waiting. She looked me up and down slowly, her expression unreadable. Then she said, "Now you look ready." Her tone wasn't mocking, it was approving, almost gentle. "You'll call me Miss Clara during work hours," she added. "And you'll speak only when spoken to." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of embarrassment and curiosity. The first few hours were awkward. Every movement felt exaggerated, every sound too loud. The fabric brushed against my legs as I walked, reminding me with every step how unusual this was. Yet Clara didn't laugh or comment, she just watched me, quietly, as I swept the floors and arranged the books. At one point, she corrected how I carried the tray. "You're holding it too high," she said, moving closer. Her fingers adjusted my grip, and I froze. "Better," she whispered, stepping back. My face felt hot. I didn't understand why I cared so much about her approval. As the day went on, something strange happened. I started to forget how ridiculous I looked. I just wanted to do things right, to earn her trust somehow. When evening came, she told me I could rest in the guest room upstairs. The room was small but cozy, with soft sheets and an old mirror across the bed. I looked at myself again before changing back into my clothes. But then I paused. For some reason, I didn't take the uniform off. I sat on the bed, staring at my reflection. It wasn't just the clothes that looked different, it was me. My posture, my expression, everything felt slightly changed. I didn't know if it was exhaustion or something deeper, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the line between who I was and who I appeared to be had begun to blur. That night, I dreamt of Clara standing at the end of the hallway, whispering my name, not the name she used to call me, but something softer, something that didn't belong to the person I used to be. And when I woke up, I could still hear it echoing in my mind. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains and I woke to the faint scent of lavender again. For a moment, I forgot where I was. The soft sheets, the quiet hum of the house, and the neatly folded maid's outfit on the chair beside the bed all reminded me that this wasn't a dream. I sat up slowly, rubbing my eyes. The events of the previous day replayed in my mind like scenes from a movie I couldn't stop watching. I should have felt embarrassed, maybe even humiliated, but instead I felt something else, an odd sense of calm, as if I had stepped into a new rhythm of life that I hadn't realized I was missing. When I got dressed and stepped downstairs, Clara was already in the kitchen, sipping coffee from a porcelain cup. Her eyes met mine for a moment, and she gave a small nod. "Good morning," she said. Her tone wasn't overly friendly, but there was a softness there that hadn't been before. "I see you slept well." "Yes, Miss Clara," I replied automatically, and as soon as the words left my mouth, I realized how natural they sounded. She smiled slightly at that, as though testing me again. "There's much to do today. I have guests arriving this evening, and I want the house spotless. You'll start with the dining room." Her voice carried authority, but also trust, as if she believed I could handle it. I tried to focus on the tasks, dusting the shelves, polishing the silver, arranging flowers. Every now and then, she would walk by, inspecting, silent but attentive. The more she watched, the harder I tried to be perfect. At one point, she stopped behind me and said quietly, "You're very thorough. Most people rush." Her compliment caught me off guard. "Thank you, Miss Clara," I said, feeling my cheeks warm. "Discipline suits you," she added, before walking away. I didn't know how to respond to that, but those words lingered in my head for hours. By late afternoon, the house looked like something out of a magazine. Clara's guests arrived, a small group of elegant women in dresses that looked effortlessly expensive. They greeted Clara warmly and then looked at me with polite curiosity. I stood quietly in the corner, serving drinks, trying not to make eye contact. I overheard bits of their conversation, something about charity events, travels, and fashion, but what caught my attention was the way they treated Clara. They respected her, admired her, even envied her. I realized then how lonely she must be in her own world, surrounded by people who only saw perfection. When one of them complimented how well the house was kept, Clara glanced at me and said, "It's all thanks to my new help." The women turned to look at me again, their smiles kind but slightly amused. One of them said, "Oh, how lovely. You have such a delicate touch." I wasn't sure how to respond, so I simply bowed my head. Clara's gaze stayed on me for a second longer than it should have, her expression unreadable. After they left, she asked me to sit down in the kitchen. "You did well today," she said. "Better than I expected." I smiled nervously, unsure what to say. "Thank you, Miss Clara." She leaned back, studying me with the kind of intensity that made me squirm. "You know," she said slowly, "most people would have refused when they saw the uniform. But you didn't." "Why?" I hesitated. "I needed the job," I admitted. "And maybe I wanted to prove something. That I could be useful." She nodded thoughtfully. "Useful. That's a word I understand. But I think there's more to it than that, isn't there?" Her question hung in the air like a challenge. I looked away, unable to answer. Over the next few days, the routine became strangely comforting. I'd wake up early, clean, cook, organize her schedule, and sometimes even prepare her outfits. Each morning, she'd inspect the uniform to make sure it was perfect. "Presentation matters," she'd say. "It changes how people see you." And slowly, it began to change how I saw myself too. I noticed my posture improving, my voice softening, my movements becoming careful and deliberate. Even the reflection in the mirror started to feel familiar, as if the person looking back wasn't pretending anymore. One evening, while I was ironing some clothes, Clara entered the room holding a box. "I think you've earned this," she said, placing it on the table. I opened it carefully and found a new uniform inside, sleeker, better tailored, and somehow more elegant. "This one's yours," she said. I looked up, confused. "Mine?" "Yes. You've done more than expected. I want you to feel that you belong here." Her words made something tighten in my chest. No one had said that to me in a long time, that I belonged anywhere. That night, when I tried on the new uniform, it fit perfectly. The mirror reflected someone confident, composed, almost graceful. I didn't know whether to be proud or terrified. The next morning, Clara noticed immediately. "It suits you," she said simply. "Better than I imagined." But not everything was simple after that. One evening, I overheard her on the phone in the hallway. Her voice was calm but cold. "No, I told you, I don't need anyone else. I have someone better now." A pause. "Yes, different. But it works." My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't sure if I should be happy or worried. Later, she found me polishing the table and asked, "Were you listening just now?" My hands froze. "I know, Miss Clara." She stepped closer. "You were. It's fine. I don't blame you. I suppose you're curious what people say about you." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "They don't understand. But I do." Then she turned and walked away, leaving me in silence. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying her words. "They don't understand. But I do." What did she mean by that? Did she see something in me that I hadn't seen myself? Or was she just playing some strange psychological game? The truth was, I didn't know anymore where the act ended and the real me began. The next morning, when I looked in the mirror, I noticed something subtle but undeniable. My expression was softer, calmer, almost serene. The uniform no longer felt like a costume. It felt like part of me. Clara noticed it too. As I poured her tea, she said quietly, "Something about you has changed. Do you feel it?" I wanted to deny it, to laugh it off, but I couldn't. "Maybe," I said. "I feel different. Lighter, somehow." She nodded knowingly. "Good. Sometimes it takes losing everything to find who you are." Her words stayed with me all day. Every gesture, every look she gave me felt layered with meaning. I didn't understand it completely, but I knew something inside me had shifted. The house didn't feel like a place of work anymore. It felt like home. And Clara didn't feel like an employer. She felt like someone guiding me somewhere I didn't yet recognize. That night, I dreamt again. This time, it wasn't Clara calling me, it was my own voice, whispering a name I'd never spoken before, yet somehow it felt like mine. I woke up with tears in my eyes, not from sadness, but from a strange sense of clarity I couldn't explain. Something inside me had changed overnight, just as the title of my life seemed to rewrite itself silently, one emotion at a time. The following morning began differently. Clara wasn't in the kitchen when I came down, and for the first time the house felt hollow. I moved through each room quietly, expecting her voice at any moment, but there was only silence and the soft echo of my footsteps. On the counter lay a note written in her careful, elegant handwriting, "Out for the day. Finish the upstairs rooms. Wear the new uniform." I read it twice. It shouldn't have felt like a command, it should have felt like work, but somehow it did something else inside me. I went upstairs and opened the wardrobe where the new uniform hung, crisp and waiting. When I slipped it on, the fabric felt softer against my skin, almost like it recognized me. I tied the apron carefully and caught my reflection in the mirror. The person standing there didn't look unsure anymore. The lines of my face seemed calmer, more centered. I breathed out slowly and, for the first time, didn't feel like I was pretending. I cleaned in silence for hours, moving room to room, each stroke of the duster feeling methodical and deliberate. Yet with every passing minute, I felt an odd sense of awareness settle in, the awareness that something inside me was shifting beyond the surface. When Clara finally returned, dusk had fallen. I was in the hallway arranging flowers when she appeared, carrying several bags. "You've been busy," she said. Her eyes scanned the spotless floor and the gleaming furniture. "Good work." I nodded, a quiet thank you, Miss Clara. She hesitated before setting the bags down. "I brought you something." She handed me a small package. Inside were a pair of delicate gloves and a simple silver pendant. "You don't have to wear it," she said. "But I think it would suit you." I held it, unsure what to say. The pendant caught the light, a tiny reflection dancing on my hand. "Why are you doing this?" I asked softly. Clara tilted her head, considering me for a moment before replying, "Because sometimes people need to see who they could be, not just who they were." Her words landed with quiet force. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't sleep. I kept running my fingers over the pendant, thinking about what she'd said. Could a person really change that much just by seeing themselves differently? Or had the person I was before been just a disguise all along? I drifted into uneasy dreams where I saw fragments of my old life, my job, my old friends, laughter that felt hollow, faces that looked at me but never saw me. Then, I saw the new reflection, the calm one, standing in Clara's hallway, holding a tray with steady hands, eyes clear. And when I woke, I realized I felt relief, not loss. The next few days were full of quiet tension. Clara became distant again, spending long hours in her study. I tried to focus on the tasks, but something in her silence made me restless. Finally, one evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I knocked on her door and said, "Miss Clara, are you upset with me?" There was a pause before her voice came. "Come in." She was sitting by the window, the room dimly lit by a single lamp. "No," she said softly. "I'm not upset. I'm thinking." I stepped closer. "About what?" "About what I've done," she said. "About what you've become." Her gaze met mine, and for the first time, I saw vulnerability there. "Do you realize how much you've changed?" I hesitated, searching for words. "I guess I feel calmer. Maybe more sure of myself." She smiled faintly. "It's more than that. When you came here, you were lost. Now you move like someone who knows where they belong." The compliment stirred something warm in my chest, but before I could reply, she stood and approached me. "You remind me of someone I used to know," she whispered. "Someone who hid behind the wrong skin for too long." I didn't understand what she meant, but I didn't have to. The silence between us said everything. From that day on, the air in the house felt charged, like we were both waiting for something unspoken to happen. Then, one afternoon, it did. Clara invited me to the sitting room and asked me to stand in front of the large mirror that faced the window. "Look at yourself," she said. I did, expecting to see what I always saw: a maid, tidy, polite, composed. But something about the way the sunlight hit the mirror made me pause. "What do you see?" she asked. I swallowed hard. "Someone who's different." "Different how?" "More real," I said before I could stop myself. Clara smiled faintly. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say." She handed me a photograph, an old one, slightly faded. It showed a young woman who looked startlingly familiar. "This was my sister," she said quietly. Before she left. I looked at the picture again. The eyes, the expression, it was like seeing my own reflection in another lifetime. "She disappeared years ago," Clara continued, "and I never understood why until I met you." My heart thudded in my chest. "What do you mean?" "You carry the same quiet ache she did," Clara said. "The need to be seen for who you are, even if you don't have the words for it yet." Her words hit deeper than I wanted to admit. My throat tightened. "I'm not sure I know who that is," I said. Clara touched my shoulder gently. "Maybe you don't have to know yet. Maybe you just have to stop hiding." That night, I sat in front of the mirror again, the pendant glinting softly in the lamplight. I thought about the person I'd been before I came here, the one who avoided mirrors, who mumbled through conversations, who didn't care about appearances because it hurt to look too closely. And then I thought about who I was now, sitting here in this quiet room, wearing a uniform that no longer felt like a disguise. The difference wasn't in the clothes or the role. It was in the way I felt inside my own skin. The next morning, I told Clara I wanted to learn how to cook properly, not just follow her instructions. She smiled and said, "Then you'll learn." As the days passed, she started trusting me with more decorating, organizing, even greeting her guests. Every task felt like another piece of a puzzle sliding into place. One evening, when I served dinner, one of her guests asked casually, "How long have you worked here?" I paused before answering, then smiled. "Long enough to feel at home." Clara's eyes met mine across the table, and in that moment, I understood that something between us had changed forever. But change has a way of testing itself. One afternoon, a letter arrived addressed to me. It was from an old coworker who'd heard I was working as a domestic and wanted to know if I was still the same person. The words stung more than they should have. Clara found me reading it and asked gently, "Does it bother you?" I nodded. "It shouldn't, but it does. Let me tell you something," she said. "People will always try to remind you of who you were. Don't let them decide who you can become." That night, I tore the letter into tiny pieces and threw them away. I looked at myself in the mirror once more, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was looking at someone temporary. The eyes that stared back were steady, certain. The person in that reflection was me. As I drifted to sleep, I realized Clara had been right from the beginning. Sometimes you don't find yourself until you serve something greater than your own fear. Sometimes, change doesn't come in thunder or fire, but in the quiet rhythm of ordinary days. Something had changed overnight, yes, but maybe it had been changing all along, one careful gesture, one word, one reflection at a time. The following week felt like the calm before something inevitable. Clara had begun acting differently, more distant in the mornings, more thoughtful in the evenings. She would watch me as I worked, not with the cold scrutiny she once had, but with something like quiet pride tinged with regret. I pretended not to notice, but I could feel the weight of her gaze following me through the halls. The air in the house had changed, even the sound of footsteps on the polished wood seemed softer, slower. One morning, I found her in the garden, sitting with a cup of tea and an unopened envelope beside her. She looked up as I approached. "You've become very good at moving quietly," she said, a small smile flickering on her lips. "You used to stumble everywhere." I smiled shyly. "I guess I learned from you, Miss Clara." Her smile faded. "You can stop calling me that, you know." I blinked. "But, it's the rule." She shook her head. "The rules were meant for someone else. You've already become more than that." I didn't know what she meant, but before I could ask, she pushed the envelope toward me. "Read it." Inside was a photograph, faded, old, like the one she had shown me before. But this time there was something different. The young woman in the picture was wearing the exact same pendant I now had around my neck. My breath caught. "That's my sister," Clara said softly. "The one who left." Her name was Elise. The name struck a chord deep inside me. Elise. It sounded familiar in a way that made my chest tighten. "I used to wonder why she disappeared," Clara continued. "Everyone said she ran away. But I always felt she just changed into someone the world wouldn't accept. She left her clothes, her name, her past. I think she wanted freedom more than anything." I ran my fingers over the photo, tracing the shape of the pendant, then touching my own. "And you think I'm like her?" I whispered. Clara nodded. "Not like her. Maybe part of what she was. Maybe part of what I've missed all these years." We sat there in silence, the sound of birds mingling with the rustle of leaves. For the first time, Clara looked tired, not physically, but as if she had been carrying something for too long. "When I offered you this job," she said, "I thought I was just helping someone who needed a place to stay. But watching you, it was like watching time fold back on itself. Like seeing Elise again, but healed." Her eyes glistened. "Do you understand now why I chose you?" I wanted to say yes, but the truth was complicated. "Maybe you didn't choose me," I said quietly. "Maybe I was meant to find this place." She smiled at that, and the sadness in her eyes softened. "Perhaps you're right." That evening, she asked me to join her for dinner, not to serve, but to sit. The dining table looked different from this angle. She poured me a glass of wine and raised hers. To second chances, she said. I hesitated, then clinked glasses. To finding who we really are, I added. For the first time in months, we talked like equals. She told me stories about her childhood, about how Elise used to braid her hair and how she never stopped believing that her sister would one day walk back through the door. I listened quietly, realizing that in a strange way, I had walked through that door, not as her sister, but as someone carrying echoes of the same lost truth. Later that night, I stood at the mirror again. The uniform hung on the hook behind me, perfectly pressed, but I wasn't wearing it. I wore my own clothes, simple, comfortable, but when I looked at my reflection, I saw no difference. The confidence, the calm, the grace, they were still there. I whispered to myself, "You're still you." And for the first time, the words felt true. But change never ends neatly. The next morning, I woke to find a letter slipped under my door. It was from Clara. "You've found what you needed here," it began. "And I think I've finally let go of what I was holding on to. I'm leaving for a while to see the places Elise once loved. The house is yours until you decide what comes next." My heart raced as I read it again and again. The house mine. It didn't feel real. I ran downstairs, calling her name, but the only answer was silence. The front door was ajar, a faint scent of lavender trailing through it. She was gone. On the kitchen table lay her pendant, the twin to the one around my neck, and a small note that simply said, "Don't hide anymore." I stood there for a long time, the stillness pressing around me. For the first time since I'd arrived, the house felt alive, as if it were breathing with me. I walked through each room, touching the furniture, the walls, the mirror. Every surface carried a memory, every corner a whisper of who I had been and who I had become. Days passed. I kept the house clean, kept the routines alive. But now it wasn't out of obligation. It was something deeper, almost sacred, a rhythm that anchored me. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection unexpectedly and see a flicker of the old uncertainty, but it never lasted. The calm always returned, stronger each time. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I sat in the garden where Clara had once sat a day. The pendant glowed faintly in the fading light. I whispered her sister's name, Elise, and for a moment, it felt like the world held its breath. I didn't know who I was meant to be, not exactly, but I knew who I wasn't anymore. Weeks later, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, a young woman stood there holding a letter addressed to the maid. She smiled shyly. "Miss Clara told me to find you," she said. "She said you could help me." Her voice trembled, uncertain, just like mine had once been. I took a slow breath and stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. "Come in," I said. "You're safe here." As she walked past, I caught sight of my reflection in the hallway mirror, the calm posture, the steady eyes, the faint smile that had replaced fear. Something deep inside me stirred, a realization blooming quietly but powerfully. I had become what Clara once was for me, a mirror for someone else to see themselves clearly. The young woman turned and asked, "What should I call you?" I paused, the question lingering in the quiet air. The name that rose to my lips wasn't the one I'd used all my life, nor the one Clara had ever called me. It was the name that had come to me in my dreams, the one that felt like both a memory and a beginning. "Elise," I said softly. "You can call me Elise." The words hung there, gentle but certain, as if they'd been waiting to be spoken all along. The girl smiled, and for the first time, I understood what Clara meant when she said something changes overnight. It wasn't about clothes or names or even the past, it was about finally seeing the truth that had always been waiting beneath the surface. As the evening shadows deepened around us, I closed the door and felt an unexpected calm settle inside me. The story I had walked into had ended, but a new one had already begun, quiet, patient, and full of light. And somewhere far away, I hoped Clara was smiling, knowing that her house, her rules, her lessons, had done more than shape me, they had helped me find myself. I looked at the pendant one last time before turning off the lights, whispering into the darkness, "Thank you." Then, with a small, steady smile, I began preparing tea for two, knowing that by morning, another life might start changing just as mine once had overnight.